What does it take to be a successful entrepreneur? A dangerous amount of coffee and a ton of grit. My name is Jason Tracy, and every week I interview business leaders to share their stories, life lessons, failures, and advice with you. Welcome to Coffee and Grit. What is up? What is up? What is up? I am so freaking excited for today's episode. We've been sitting here, and Cameron had to finally cut us off and say, "Hey guys, do you want to have this conversation on the actual podcast?" Like, yes we do. We're talking about some of my favorite things: entrepreneurship. We're talking about music. We're talking about community. We're talking about history. We're talking about an amazing project that these two guys are putting together. That I'm super excited to one, have these guys on to be able to create awareness, to get it out there. And I'm just excited to watch this whole thing unfold. So one of the guys you're going to recognize as a past guest, Brandon Still from Integrated Life. And I've talked about him and his events in a roundabout way on this show several times. Several of the guests we've had on the podcast have come from my relationship and connection with Brandon and his events, from Dr. Rhonda, Corey Luber, Corey Thompson, who have we had recently, Mary Newman. We've had a ton of amazing people on just from that relationship. And so Brandon reached out to me a couple weeks ago, and I knew this thing that him and Bill Arnold, who is our other guest, entrepreneur, musician, and I knew about this thing they were putting together, and they played the song for us at the Integrated Life event in June. That was super awesome, and he reached out and was like, "Can we come on the show?" And it's like, again, super excited. So Bill, Brandon, welcome to Coffee and Grit.
Thanks for having us on.
Thank you.
Again, my pleasure. And as my wife has said, she's super excited to hear Bill's voice on the podcast. So now I made him shy.
Maybe there's a future in advertising for me, right?
I got the voiceover work going. So tell me about Echoes in the Iron.
Yeah, so Echoes in the Iron started back in March. Bill and I got to talking, and it was kind of just an idea. It was a little bit of a, "Hey, Bill, what if?" And we've been working on it since then. It's very organic. It's growing, but Echoes in the Iron is a multimedia project, and our goal is to celebrate and further ignite the revolution and revitalization of small towns throughout the Rust Belt. And we're doing it through the power of music, storytelling, entrepreneurship, and community. And the idea is that we're doing a docuseries, we're writing articles, we're creating social media content to shine a spotlight on the untold stories and the people in these towns that are doing amazing things that nobody really knows about. And at the end of the day, we want people to sit there and listen and say, what if I did that? Or why can't I do that? And hopefully something really cool grows from that.
What led you to this? Just kind of that background of, you're going out to these different towns across the Midwest, right?
Yeah, so through Integrated Life, I've been working with small towns to launch co-working spaces, kind of a third space sort of idea. And it's been amazing. It's all about the people. You meet such amazing people in these towns, and some of the towns kind of have a head start. They're doing great. Brighton's a really good example of that. And then others need to get started. And, that's kind of our goal. And Bill's music really speaks to, I think, the whole Midwestern vibe and the hard work. And, as I started thinking about this project and, even kind of how Bill and I met, which was through pop-up music events in downtown Clarkson. And, there's just nobody better to champion that whole idea than Bill.
Well, and I love, learning about you. You've got that you're an entrepreneur plus musician, and you're mixing, we're talking about the stories.
Yeah, I've pretty much been ruined. I don't think I can't really work for anybody anymore. So yeah, I mean, I've been in business, partnered with my brother in a small construction company for close to 30 years now, and this is, also a musician, lifelong musician. But now, as I get older, I'm spending a lot more time with music, And yeah, that's how I met Brandon. I live in Clarkston. I've lived in Clarkston for over 20 years. I think we're getting close to 25 years, really. And I had heard about a music show in my town at a place I'd never heard of, and a Wiltsey's. And I'm like, what is this place? And I'm like, there can't be shows in this town that I don't know about. But I know the people playing there. So my wife and I went there, and I'm like, this is something. This is really something. I've always been enamored by smaller rooms, house concerts. I just love the intimacy, the connection that an artist can have with the audience, and the audience is part of the show.
Yeah.
It's different. You've been there, you've seen what it's like. It's not somebody's blue jeaned butt on a jumbotron. You can talk to these people. And they can talk. As a performer, we want to know the people we're playing to also. And so I met Brandon through that. I liked his model of having a daytime co-working facility, but at night, what are you going to do? That's a great space. It's right downtown, and you're bringing in musicians, artists, songwriters to perform there. I'm like, this is great. This is all part of that whole aesthetic that I like, and we hit it off. I'd done a number of shows for him, both solo and with my band 1 Ton Trolley, and yeah, we developed a relationship from that, and we would start getting together and sharing our ideas on what this would look like in other places. And I've been blessed to be able to go to some of those places and see what other people have done and what it's done for the communities and how it draws people together. It's instead of the circus coming down, putting up a big tent and having the circus in there, you can have this thing and in your town, and maybe the artists come through there. The people are there already. They just need a place to go and experience it. And, we're conditioned to deal with what we're given, right? You can listen to any song you want as long as it's what we're programming on terrestrial radio for you to hear.
Yeah.
I mean, that model's going away now in a lot of ways with streaming and everything. But, the same thing. You can have any color car you want as long as it's black. You can,
with that, there's a whole thing going on right now, right, with Drake. The musician Drake, when you talk about streaming and it going away, but actually what Spotify was doing was pushing Drake. Like you wanted to listen to like emo rock, you got Drake with braids and singing a like love song. You got like Drake pushed to you no matter what you wanted to listen to. And so they were like, and now Drake is turning around and suing Kendrick Lamar because he's accusing the industry doing the same thing and putting his music out, and so he's like basically admitting this is what they did to create Drake's career. It's crazy.
It is crazy.
You're fed something versus choosing.
But the
something.
reality is, I mean, if you're a performer, if you're a songwriter, if you're in a band or whatever, you don't have any choice but to try to push yourself. Just the playing field is leveled a little bit, but it still takes money. You're not going to get any. You just put an event on Facebook. It doesn't mean people are going to come.
Yeah.
So many of my contemporaries lament the way things are going, that they now have to put content creator next to songwriter or guitarist or whatever. But the reality is, in this huge sea of performers and songwriters, of artists, this vast array of entertainment options, how do you set yourself up?
Yeah.
So there's somebody out there that is going to love my music as much as there's people out there that are going to hate it. But they might love somebody else that I know's music, and there's something out there for everyone. You have to get it out there to show people. So Echoes in the Iron, what we talked about this, like, how do you foster this? How do you champion the folks that are creating the places for this to happen in their community? How do they draw their community together? So here I'm sitting in this room at Wiltsie's for the first time, and I see people I know. And I know the performers. One of them's like, "Hey, do you mind videotaping this for me, Bill?" And I'm like, "Sure." I'm right in the front row. Yes, I don't mind doing that at all. And that's we had a common interest in that, and I've seen how this has worked in places where you ordinarily wouldn't go to a town. There wasn't anything to see there.
Yeah.
We talk about some towns that Brandon's been to where the only place that people would gather was the bar that was there for
generations, right?
70 years or something. And
Yeah.
then the owner dies and it's gone and nobody has to go. Nobody has anywhere to go at night. They got to go to another town. That's not right. There has to be something. And it doesn't have to be the most expensive option, but obviously part of Echoes and the Iron is we want to champion the people that take little and make something great with it, or take a lot and make something great with it. Whether it's brick and mortar, whether it's in their own basement, and they're encouraging a pop-up house concert, where people are bringing, a dish to pass or whatever. You're going to meet somebody that, let's say you have a house concert. That guy that lives down the street from you, you drive by him, you wave at him.
Yeah.
You see him when you're walking your kids around on Halloween or whatever, but you don't know his name. You don't know anything about him. Maybe you have a house concert. They come in there. Maybe it's one of your other neighbors have a house concert, and you're meeting somebody, and you're creating a connection. You're making community work. So music is that kind of a glue. Brandon brought up. Like we talk about these things. There was a lot of times we weren't sure really what was the best way, what's the best direction for Echoes in the Iron. We've kind of condensed it, and is it about the buildings that it happens in? Is it about just the people? Is it just the music? And I think we've kind of condensed it to how the music glues it all together. I keep saying glues it together because that's really what it is. You have a co-working facility, which is what Brandon specialized in, which is where Wiltsie's started. People come to work. They go home, but what brings them back? It's the music. It's something for them to share with other people that they live near. And maybe they come from a neighboring town or whatever it might be. But like we were talking before the camera started rolling, I mean, historically speaking, if you wanted to go see live music, you're going to go to the bar.
Yeah.
You're going to go to the church, or you're going to go to an arena.
Yeah.
To see something big. And there's more options than that. And people are unaware of them.
Sometimes sometimes more expensive doesn't make it better. Sometimes bigger doesn't make it better, right?
It depends on what your experience is. So there's a lot of people that just love the huge concert experience.
Yeah.
And the excitement of it, the loudness, the lights, the smoke, even the blue jeaned butt on the Jumbotron, whatever it might be. But it's not the only thing. We're certainly not saying don't go see those. Go see what you want to see. But we're saying that there's other opportunities out there, that you can have a personal relationship with somebody you're about to see play music. You're breaking bread with them beforehand. You're getting to know a little bit about them. They're getting to know a little bit about you. And it makes the performance, in my opinion, just that much more special. That closeness, that there's an intimacy involved.
There's connections and a relationship and feeling to it.
There is. And, the first time I saw somebody cry from one of my songs, I was taken aback by that. I'm like, oh,
wow,
that's I don't know how to deal with that.
Yeah.
And then they came up, and that song that you sang really made me think about my grandmother or my dad or whatever it might have been, or the town that I grew up in. And you're like, wow, that's great that we can have this conversation about it, other than you just putting it on a Facebook post that my management company, of which I don't have, is handling all my social media, and I'm never going to read that.
Yeah.
It's a different experience, and everybody makes it
Well,
happen.
just kicking off, like you two met through music, right? You know, you would have eventually met, even if it wasn't in that event, that time, through music. You would have ended up meeting and connecting.
Yeah, we both live in Clarkston.
Yeah.
So I've lived in Clarkston, like I said, like close to 25 years. I've raised 3 kids there. So everybody that we knew was families of our kids, classmates, families, neighbors, because the kids would play together.
Yep.
We'd walk around on Halloween. We'd have the fire in the driveway and the beer drinking and everything that goes on with all of that.
Yep.
That was in our little community. You know, and the kids get older.
Where do you go?
You sporting events.
Yeah.
Right? Dance,
Yep.
sports, all of that kind of stuff draws you together to the community. So that was my community in Clarkston. Wiltsey's really opened it up to me to a whole different thing. Now I'm a member of the Chamber of Commerce. I know people I wouldn't have otherwise known. My band, One Ton Trolley, does shows in the town that we may have never done.
Wow.
You know,
So
because
were
we've
you
gotten
not doing
to
shows before that?
Not in Clarkston. It was like
Wow.
I went other places to play music.
I didn't realize that. That's so crazy.
I used to say, well, if I want to play music, I'm going to have to drive at least an hour one way.
Wow.
You know, with the exception of like Lake Orion. We were playing in Lake Orion, or I was playing in Lake Orion. But you know, yeah, it wasn't until I made that transition from family community to doing what I do. And I otherwise may have never known Brandon. I would know who he is now because of, the footprint that he makes in the town now from everything else he does. And much of that, I think, sprang forth from Wiltsey's.
It's interesting because I have not been in Clarkston as long. We moved there in 2016, and it was tough. You know, you have that kind of close-knit small town, and you're an outsider. It's like, how do you get to know people? And we made our first friends when we got a dog, which was great. And then we got closer with people when we had kids. We had that in common. But I feel like I didn't really start making friends until we had Wiltsey's music night. Until then I was just the guy people rented a space from. But you get to know people on a whole different level. And it was fun to watch, even in the co-working space. You'd have these people who would work, a couple desks apart, who really didn't interact all that much. And all of a sudden you give them an opportunity to maybe have some libations, listen to music, relax on a couch and chat. And now they're chatting during the day, and they're collaborating, and they're talking about the community, and they're talking about what else do we need in the community. And it's just these little sparks that start to add up. And you kind of go back to what made them want to be there outside of work. And, it was music, I think. And that can happen in all kinds of places. It doesn't have to be a co-working space.
What sparked the idea for you for Wiltsey's?
So actually, I love this story. I wrote about it once. My wife and I were over in Scotland, and we did this tour, and it was called an underground Scottish folk music tour. And we're waiting. It was an Airbnb experience. We're waiting in this dark alley in Edinburgh. It's very like stereotypical. It's misting. It's dark. We're hidden under this alcove. And this guy comes walking up, and he's got this long hair, cardigan on, and he kind of looks at us a little bit, and he says, "You're not going to hear anybody play Sweet Home Alabama tonight." And my mood just dropped immediately, because the last time we had been there, we spent the whole night in this bar with other Americans listening to some guy sing Sweet Home Alabama and, Caroline and all the songs. And I was like, well, that stinks. Very first place he takes us to, we walk into this room, not much bigger than this. There's 10 people in the corner playing all kinds of instruments, violins, accordions. They're singing, they're clapping. And immediately, it was amazing. Like, the atmosphere was so cool, and they were having fun, and everybody else was around just chatting and talking and enjoying it. It was such a great atmosphere. Then the last place he took us to was called Captain's Bar. And he ran this thing called the Sessions, where he was kind of the host, but people could get up and sing a song or read a poem. And it was super cool. He played a couple songs that really inspired me. One of the, I think, best things, there was a guy who stood up and read a poem. And it was the other side of Festival Town. Edinburgh is known as Festival Town. And as he was walking out, I told him, that was really cool. And he handed me the program that he read it from. It was his poem. And so we went back and experienced it again. People were talking about political rallies, and it was just this really vibrant, cool hub of a community. And I was talking with my wife, Mallory. I said, Clarkson doesn't really have that right now, at least not that I'm exposed to and invited to. And I said, we need to do something where we can invite people in and create that place where these sparks can happen. And you can have this intersection of, people who have lived here for 25 years and people who are brand new. And, again, it kind of came back to why would somebody want to go to that place? And it was the music. That was what kind of started it. And our first music night, Jackie Pappas played. We called it After Hours. We had over 50 people jammed into this little thing. We're like, okay, we need a little organization. This is a little nuts. And so it slowly evolved over the years. And, I've gotten to know so many cool people. Like, I don't know how Bill and I would have organically crossed paths. We're at different stages of life. His kids are older than ours, but I'm so glad it did. And, other musicians, and just, I've had neighbors who I never kind of knew existed, and they've come to every single show. And, gotten to know them, and I don't think I would have. And, so that was kind of the whole growth of Wiltse's. And then, seeing what it's done for me personally, what I think it's done for the community, it's, how do we help other people start to do this in other communities? And Echoes is kind of the answer, at least for me.
That's so cool.
We hope. Our hope is that Echoes will now be that glue that gets all of these communities to ask the questions. Well, what if we had that in my town? And then they make that leap to why not me? Why not? And it doesn't have to be a massive investment. It just needs to be an investment from the heart, a little bit of time, a little bit of planning, a little bit of help from maybe people like us who have done pop-up shows before and have been to different places and seen how this thing works. I think you're hard-pressed to go to a house concert or something like that and not be somehow affected by it. I grew up thinking everything was about big concerts, or you're going to go to the bar to see a band, and when on a whim, there's a couple moments in my adult life that changed the course of my life with my music. And one of them was on a whim after dinner with another couple. We were walking by the Ark in Ann Arbor. And I'm like, hey, this is the Ark. We should check this place out. I'd never been there. We went in there and it ended up seeing Lowen and Navarro. I'd never heard of them. We just happened to be there. Let's go. Let's get the tickets and go. And Lowen and Navarro had wrote this song, We Belong, that was a big hit for Pat Benatar. So here I'm discovering that, so songwriters will travel around and play in little folk clubs like this. This is really cool. And I was so blown away. I bought every CD they had, and I just split my head open and had stitches there. So I remember Eric Lowen, who's since passed, actually had signed the CD to Patch, but it changed. From that point on, it was like, this is what my music is meant to be. Two guitars, two voices, that's good for me. I think that's fantastic. And I just was overwhelmed by it. I don't think I would have ultimately really discovered bluegrass music, which has been a huge part of my life because of that. And that was the second pivotal watershed moment for me. I've got a place up near Grayling on the upper Manistee River, and we would have our opening weekend trout camp there. And one of the guys said, my friend John Byrell, who lives in Brighton, said, we should have this bluegrass band Chase and Steel come down and play the opening day party. I'm like, well, that sounds crazy. Why, from Marquette, Michigan. Well, why would they want to come down here for that? He's like, well, if we probably spring them enough for gas money and booze, and they'll come down and play. Well, it changed me. Having them in my cabin, putting on a show where everybody was floored, especially me. Well, all of those guys are lifelong friends of mine now. Adam Carpenter, the lead singer and mandolin guitar player, is one of my life's best friends. I've written several songs with him. More of them are in the works. I'm on his records. I would have never known those guys.
Yeah.
Even though we were both rabid trout fishermen, we would have never had a reason to cross paths.
All the way from Marquette, down. Yeah.
And that changed my trajectory completely, to the point where I had a dobro at home that I'd never played because it seemed too difficult. And I'm like, well, I'm in a room full of guitar players here at this bluegrass jam at my cabin. They don't need me. When I go home, I'm going to figure out how to play that damned thing. And I worked at it and worked at it and worked at it. And now I've since played dobro on a couple of their records, one of Chase and Steel's records, and on Adam Carpenter and the Upper Hands recent records. So it changed so much for me. And it was all just because of putting people together in a small room with live music and creating a community from 8 hours apart from each other and lifelong brotherhoods, really. It's hard to quantify the value of these moments until you've lived it. And then when you've put decades on it and you look back on it and you're just like, what if that had never happened? What if? What if that hadn't happened? My life would be different than it is right now. I wouldn't know him. I would not be sitting here right now. If not for those two moments in my life that were whim. And, makes a difference.
Another one of my favorite things, Bill, is go back and look at the decisions and the epiphanies that we have and how it influences our life. And, and again, how powerful is that to say, I wouldn't be here right now. But even outside of this podcast, what would life be like in retrospect without the relationship with Brandon?
It wouldn't be as good.
You would never know.
I don't know.
You think about the gap on that. And one of the things I say a lot is hell is meeting the person that we could have been. And if and that encompasses so much. It encompasses not going to that live show, being like Wiltsie's, I've never heard of this, going out and making that decision to do that and put yourself in that, and then having that conversation with Brandon. If you don't do those things, what does life look like? It alters it significantly.
It really does. And you don't ever know.
You don't ever know.
It's like you said, hell would be meeting the person you could have been.
Yep.
My life would be less rich for not having music in it like it is right now. I don't have to play on the stage at LCA or Ford Field or whatever. I don't care about that. I'd really rather play to 20 people who are intently engaged in what I'm doing. And playing in a room where you can look in everybody's eyes is a special moment. Having those lights in your eyes where you maybe can see a couple people in the front. I mean, granted, it would be awesome playing in an arena, but it's a different experience. And I would have never experienced that for myself if not for a couple of moments. And the third one was probably going into Wiltsie's, finding out about it. I would eventually have found my way in there. I mean, as a songwriter in the community, I would have eventually found out about it, or somebody would told them, hey, you should maybe check these guys out or whatever. And we might have made it happen then. Yep. But I think once we met and once we found a commonality of purpose, everything else was inevitable. We both believe in championing the people that want to make their community better and are willing to make music that glue their place together. You know, it's not about bringing a big company to your town.
Yeah.
It's about taking what you have in your town. I'm willing to, you know, when we started looking at Echoes in there, where are we going to do this? We're talking about the Rust Belt. We're talking all over the Rust Belt, whatever, because we were looking at, oh, this is great how somebody's going to take this old grain mill and make it into a distillery or a brewery, and they're going to have live music there. It's going to be kind of a listening room. Well, it could be an old creamery. It could be an old laundromat. It could be an old storefront in a northern Michigan town that was pretty run down, and there was not much reason to go to that town and walk around because there wasn't any stores open. And now there's this shining beacon, and in the middle of it is this gem of a listening room, you know. And we, you know, I guess we can use some names of some places that have inspired us. You know, one of my favorites is a place in Lake Orion, Michigan, 20 Front Street. It is just, from the first time I went in there, I was in love. And it's it's a place you can see every face. You can hear every note. You can hear the teardrops hitting the floor. You know, it's one of those kinds of places. It's a magic place. And it's run by magic people, good people. Well, I've since played in 2 other places that were inspired by that place. One of them in Kentucky, Holla Holler, a gentleman by the name of Bob Wan, who I greatly respect. His, tenacity to go after. He asked the question, what if? And then he said, why not me? And he did it. Or I can think of John and Marcella Costin at the Lark Theater in Sheboygan, Michigan. So I've played at all 3 of these places, 2 of them inspired by the other one. And they probably would not be there if not for 20 Front Street. So all it takes is that spark. Yep. So that's what we're talking about, that spark.
Yep.
And then how do you feed the kindling to that? And the beautiful part about this, as an entertainer, we're always looking for places to play, right? And we're looking harder than the people that are looking for us, okay? Which is kind of a juxtaposition, right? Yeah. So when places like Holla Holler or the Lark Theater are inspired by the manifestations of what the folks that started 20 Front Street do, that fire is growing.
Yep.
Now, as more and more towns adopt this type of a community building experience, whether it's brick and mortar, whether it's just pop-ups in whatever spaces they have, a barn, a basement, a field, whatever it might be, as more and more places do this, you've got a circuit now for these entertainers to go around. And you've got fresh talent always coming through for who? The people that live in the community. So we're huge fans of the people that don't just say what if. We're huge fans of the people that say, why not me? And then they take that chance and they do it. And they create something bigger than themselves. And you know what? They're going to inspire somebody else to do that in another place. And as more and more people in those communities learn, this experience is available for me, you know, it grows.
Difference makers creating a ripple.
You're every time, difference makers. It just takes one to get it started sometimes, and it takes the next one, and then the next one, and the next one. You know, I've seen how the house concert series can go like that. You have 30 people to your house, and they're like, I've never been to anything like this before. I want this, you know. I want to do this at my house 3 towns away. And I've got friends that would love to come to this, and then they get inspired. and it grows. You don't have to spend $1,000 to go see live music. And that's what it costs. If you live 2-3 hours away from Detroit and you want to go to a concert and you want to see original music, you're going to take some time off of work, maybe. Yeah. You're going to pay for a room. You're going to pay for food, for parking. The tickets are going to be hundreds of dollars. I'm not saying don't do that. I'm just saying not everybody can do that all the time. It's out of reach for a lot of people. Everyone loves music.
Everyone loves music. And, and we were talking about before we started recording the Unplugged event. And it's just from my aspect of being there, and it was so awesome. Gracie, my wife, got to come to you, and you talk about those relationships, and you and your band One Ton Trolley are playing. I don't know how many people were in the house, like 20-ish people inside the house. And there's just this community of people talking. But like me and Gracie were on like a high for like a week after that event, like out telling everybody, you've got to go to this event next year, like it's so amazing. And Gracie was like, I've never been in an environment where I've just created relationships like that. Like you were playing music, and her in Dr. Kristen, the chiropractor, were talking. She was like, we were like deep. She's like, I feel like we're going to be friends forever. Like just the relationships that we created through that event all day were amazing, but then it was sealed off with the environment, with the music. And then on top of it, I got to know more about you, about your band. Like you're playing and you're telling us the origin and the meaning behind the songs that you're playing us. It's just such an intimate, it was awesome. It was a phenomenal experience. And it's talking exactly what we're talking about is like those relationships, the communities, like what kind of opportunities are created in a small town when you have something like this.
That was one of my favorite, I think, nights so far in terms of music, even though the event wasn't necessarily a music event.
Yeah.
It's the second year in a row that Bill has helped us kind of cap off the event. And I remember looking around the room, and you've got One Ton Trolley up there. The lights are low. There's a fire, and people are roasting marshmallows in the kitchen. Emma was finishing up, after a long day of cooking food for, 50 people all day long. And it felt so cool. I had said it felt like it was out of a Tolkien novel or something. And now we're all off to brave the journey.
Yes.
Individually, but we all came together that one night, woven together by that music and the shared experience. It was really cool. And that in that location has sparked multiple music shows now, and they want to continue doing them.
It grows.
It grows. Yeah.
Well, I don't know if I can remember if we were on film when you were talking about having that conversation.
Yeah, with Annie.
I think it was before we started filming.
Yeah, so Annie Navetny, she runs Narren Farms, and I think it was one of the first times we kind of casually spent time just chatting. There was no agenda. I wasn't trying to rent a facility.
Yeah.
And she just said, I want to do this all the time here. And we did. We scheduled more. And then one of the owners of the facility came over. We had 3 musicians up there, and he said, they're so amazing. Where did you find them? I said, they're all from within a half an hour away. And he's like, why haven't I heard of them? And it's like that's the question, and that's the challenge too. But, we live in a cool area with social media and streaming, like Bill was talking about earlier. There are some downsides, but it's never been easier to get somebody halfway around the world to listen to your music.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So my hope with our project is that we can not only champion the towns and the people in the towns, but the musicians that are willing to go play these sorts of events. They're not doing it for the money. They want to be a part of that experience on both sides, and they want to make a difference too.
And if you'll consider, how this will grow and it becomes more of a network, well, then people in these other towns that wouldn't have otherwise heard of maybe me and my music, they're checking out, well, who's coming? Well, this guy was at Holla Holler, last month, or he's played at 20 Front Street, or he's going to be at this place or whatever. And you can find things like there might be video of it. they follow you, they check you out on Spotify or Apple Music or Amazon or whatever it might be,
Yep.
YouTube, and they know what you're all about before you even get there, and it's so much more of a grassroots way of bringing music out to the world that is just so aesthetically pleasing to me as a music lover as much as a music creator. I mean, I love to sit and watch great musicians as much or more than I like playing for people, you know. So it grows and it grows and grows. And when we started looking at this, we were like, well, where do we do this? Anywhere. And we look at how do we champion this town? Well, there's every town has got great history. Every town has great people. And what people in those towns might not realize is probably got great songwriters and musicians that don't have anywhere to go. They're driving the hour away that I was doing for so many years. Or
They got local talent and
they
entertainment.
just don't have, or maybe there's a great songwriter, but it's like, where am I going to play? Nobody will hire me to be a songwriter. I can go to this coffee house and, play my songs, unplugged or whatever. But, I can't really advertise that I'm doing that. And it's just going to be whoever comes in there. Or I'm going to play in a cover band because I just got to play. And there's nothing. I love cover bands as much as the next person too. But maybe they're a great songwriter that doesn't ever get to share their songs unless they can figure out the mysteries of TikTok or something, So every town
you mentioned
has
that.
it.
You talked about the platform of social media, and every artist can get out there. It's never been easier to share, but everybody knows that, right? And how do you find all the millions of artists that are out there? And for me, I know even going to the big concerts, some of my favorites have been the opening band that I'd never heard of.
Right.
And now I go out and I buy their album because I'm like, wow, they rock. They were good. I'd never heard of them, or going to the bar and listening to somebody that I'm like, I want to go listen to them the next time. We have a band here called the Local Heroes. I love
yeah.
I love when they're going. They do cover band stuff,
Sure.
but they're fun to watch.
Absolutely. And, and that's just it. If you don't get out there, you don't discover. If you don't have a reason to get out there, you don't discover. So, we're saying
That's so true, because if I don't have a reason to go,
Yeah.
I'm not discovering it.
Out there in TV land, if you're thinking my town would love to have something like this, you don't look for somebody else. You're the one. Do it.
Yeah.
It's not rocket science. It's a little bit of event planning, a lot of love of music, and a lot of desire to foster a strong community. And the people will come if and it doesn't have to be, you're not trying to set up the third Woodstock here. You know what I mean? You don't have to, it doesn't have to be that complicated. And, and if you start reaching out to some folks, you might find that you're not alone and other people want to get involved with helping you do that.
Yep.
So,
it's like entrepreneurship. You just got to start.
And
are you going to have your final iteration the first thing out of? No. I love how you guys came in. It's like it's always evolving. It's constantly
it's
evolving.
evolved since March. It's evolved. We're on multiple iterations right now, but we feel that's why
because you got to do it. You got to go out there
you
and
have to do it. You
can theorize all you want, but
sometimes you just got to stick your hands in the icky stuff and feel around until you find the good stuff in there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's really what it comes down to. You just have to do it. If you wait, I realize that, at least with my music, I'm not exactly young enough to be able to say, well, I can do this in 10 years. I may not have 10 years to do it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter, how old you are or whatever. You can get out there and play, and you can get out there and listen, and you can meet people and enjoy the spirit of the event. Early on, most performers, they're crippled with fear about going on stage. And I probably read it or somebody told me this one time, but they were like, why don't you consider that everybody in that audience is on your side. They came here to be entertained, not to watch you fail. And if you're up there sweating and twitching and freaking out, they're either going to think you're a meth head or that you are terribly, nervous, and they might sympathize with you a little bit. But you got to break through that thing where you have the confidence that they're on your team.
Yeah.
And give them your all and prove to them why they came out of their house when they could have watched it on TV.
Are you probably going to suck when you start? Absolutely. Is it going to sound bad? Probably.
I got to see some of the best entertainers I've ever seen weren't all that great. They just had an alarming amount of confidence. And, it's like, not everybody will admit it, but what's one of the most attractive features in another human being is confidence. We all know that guy that we're like, how did he get all the girls? Well, he was massively confident, and they sensed that, and that's an attractive feature in human beings. Or, we're looking for that person that's not afraid to get out there and get it done. And
Arnold Schwarzenegger is always a good example of somebody I use. Because if you talk about bodybuilding to this day and you say name a bodybuilder, every single time I ask that question, somebody says Arnold Schwarzenegger right out of the first guess. Nobody, can you even think of another name? I can, but not many. Arnold Schwarzenegger dominant, but he hasn't been a bodybuilder in that realm, Mr. America or whatever it is, since 1976. Yeah. It was his and he's not nearly the size of some of these guys, right?
No.
He wasn't perfect, but his confidence, his swagger, he built a brand around that.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's what you do.
Yeah.
It's that's how it is, and that sells. I saw Martin Sexton one time, which obviously was well accomplished. It wasn't like a nobody. But I was alarmed at he had no fear on stage. And he was doing the mannerisms, everything. I was just I could never do that. That is outrageous. And I'm like, wow, what does it take to be able to get up in front of strangers and do that? Well, I would never try to copy what he does because we also talked before the cameras started rolling, you got to do you.
Yeah.
You got to do you. So one of the reasons why I like working with Brandon is he's genuine. There's no falsities whatsoever. And we both have a genuine interest in seeing communities develop by the use of music and drawing people together. It's because we've both felt it. And we, even if on different sides of the microphone, we've felt that feeling that you can have in a room when this happens. And we want everybody to feel that. We want people in the middle of nowhere to not have to drive 2 hours and spend $1,000 to be entertained.
Yep.
And we think that they should have access to more entertainers that will travel through there because those entertainers can now afford to go on the road. If you ask me what's the hardest thing about managing a band, it's logistics. Because if I want to take my band out of town, well, if I'm not getting comped to rooms, I've got to drop a lot of money on rooms, and we may not make that at the door. And then gas is so expensive, and people got to eat. People got to drink, and these things add up pretty quickly, And but it's if you can go out and you can do a string of shows, you can make these things work, And there's a lot of guys and gals out there that aren't doing it because they can get that one show booked, but what are they going to do to get there and then to get back? That one show is not enough to offset the costs of the logistics. So these places, and some of the places that we're talking about, I'll use Holla Holler as an example. It's not just an entertainment venue, a listening room. It's also an Airbnb. So let's say you're traveling around, there's no show, but you want to kind of live the rock star experience. Maybe you want to go somewhere and write songs or videotape yourself playing music in a venue that's been built up. You can stay there. You know, you rent the place.
Wow.
Have it yourself and do what you've got to do in there.
That's pretty cool.
Well, that's what pays, you know.
Yeah.
That's how you can make these things. And there's people out there that are really, really crafty at how they put their model together. I'll bring up the Lark Theater in Sheboygan. John and Marcella Costin have created this oasis in that building. And they took, I think, a few different storefronts. And there's a Simply Marcella ladies shop. There's a Stormy Cromer, like men's shop. I don't know if they still have it, but they had Michigan beer on tap in there. And you could buy the Stormy Cromer hats and stuff, which is a Michigan company. They had a fudge ice cream coffee type of a shop. Mm-hmm. In the back of the building, I think it's called the Lion's Head, they had a really fine dining restaurant with a little bar there. And nestled in the middle was this gem, the Lark Theater, which was obviously modeled after 20 Front Street in Lake Orion because the same design motif.
Yeah. Yep.
It's a little bit smaller room. But they've created this place that makes people want to go to downtown Sheboygan now. It's where else? Maybe you'd go to the brewery or you'd go and get some coffee or maybe to a dive bar or something like that. But there wasn't much for the whole experience. They've created the whole experience there. You can shop, you can have a drink, you can have dinner and a show.
It's really cool in talking about like even the echoes in the iron, right? And talking about like the echoes of the past, because you're seeing now, I love downtowns, and for a long time, downtowns were disposed of, and it looked like downtowns were gonna die, and there's Auburn Hills and all these other places were popping up. Now I think that I see a bigger emphasis on downtowns, and you're seeing these cool old buildings turned into breweries or turned into places where people can gather and create new memories. And so I love that echoes in the iron, because it's like going back, we have Becker Brewery here.
Yeah, I love that building.
It's a great building, right? Phenomenal. It used to be Pink Hotel. It was a big part of our history here in Brighton. Yeah. And so what they did with it, and like they hand painted the, the wallpaper, like it's extravagant what they did. But like thinking about that history of like how many people across our town's origin have gathered there, how many meetings, how many opportunities have been created. We're talking about opportunities that are created just between you two in a room, in present day. Looking back at that history, how many deals have been made here? How many connections have been fostered in these places? When you take a look at that,
it's history.
Yeah.
History is made everywhere, and we don't all know about it. You can, driving down the interstate, and you see these same signs for these towns at the exits that you like, oh yeah, this is the place that has the Speedway with the McDonald's next to it. Or this place has the Starbucks. Oh, we got to go to the next exit. That's where the Big B is, or whatever it might be. But I was profoundly inspired by the descriptor that I can't stand, which is flyover states, flyover towns, or drive-by towns. Because every town has a story, it has a history, it has something cool. We started looking at different places, and we were challenging ourselves. Let's pick some towns that don't have crap going on for them.
Oh, I love it.
And every single one of them had some history to it.
Yeah.
I'd written a song, My Last Dime, about getting out of a town, which is ironic now because we're trying to get people to stay in their town. But
no, stay. Actually.
Sometimes you got to get the hell out, right? But my last dime. Well, how do you get out of a town if you have nothing and you're down to your last dime? Your only transportation option is to get on the bus. Well, being a songwriter, I don't want to say bus or Greyhound bus. let me use the Google machine and find out what we've got going on. What was that? Is there a nickname for a Greyhound bus? And I find it was the Dirty Dog. Well, I'd never heard that before. So I put that in the song. Well, once we started talking about towns you could go to, I was challenging myself. And I'm like, okay, so I was able to find out that the Dirty Dog was the nickname for the Greyhound bus. But what's the history behind Greyhound buses, where they come from? And I'll probably get it wrong, but I want to say it was Hibbing, Minnesota.
Huh.
So I'm like, challenge yourself one step further, Bill. What's in Hibbing? Oh my gosh, the world's largest open air iron ore pit. I'm like, we're echoes in the iron.
Oh my God, yeah.
And then I think it was the childhood home of Bob Dylan. I'm like, these things write themselves. When Bob Wan put Holla Holler in Irvine, Kentucky, and it's eastern Kentucky. It's like right in the Appalachians, right in the kind of the beginning of those in Estill County. He had went down to Florida, and he found that a lot of people that moved down to Florida, they were like, this is a bit too much. I don't want to live down here. This is I'm not used to this, but I'm not going all the way back to Michigan.
Yeah.
So what he discovered was the halfbacks, the people that go halfway back. And you pick a state like Kentucky with their tax situation, their income tax situation, and in an area of Estill County where the housing prices were very low. And he put this place there because he's like, why can't we have this here? He goes, I'm coming back. I'm coming here, but I don't have my 21st Street. So why don't we have something like that? Now, they have music festivals there, some pretty sizable ones. So I'm looking at that town. I'm like, what else has this place got? We go down there and play there. Well, that's the last Carhartt actual manufacturing facility in the United States in Irvine, Kentucky. We met the retired dentist that makes Kentucky Mountain Moonshine in his barn. I'm like, there's just so much here.
Yeah.
And I think you could do what the Bay City Rollers did, throw a dart at the map. If you remember, that's how they got their name. They threw the dart at the map and it hit Bay City, so they were the Bay City Rollers. They've never been to Bay City. So I would like, as a challenge, throw a dart at a map and find something interesting in that town. I guarantee there's something 5,000%. There. You just got to dig a little bit, and you got to enjoy history a little bit, and having maybe an eye for, what if, and have just a little bit of stones for the why not? Why not me? Let's do this thing. And then put your heart and soul into it a little bit, and you may be really surprised at what a great legacy that you can create and be part of a larger network of other people creating great legacies in their town, and thereby creating a circuit for entertainers to get around. It's literally a win-win-win. It doesn't have to cost a lot.
I love what you said earlier. Is like, I hate it when people say there's nothing to do here.
Yeah. I feel like we all fall into that trap. You say you went somewhere, maybe up north camping, and so we say, oh, how's that town? And you say, there's not much going on there. But something I've been really hit by is that every town has a cemetery. Mm. It doesn't matter how small that town is. Somewhere right around there is the cemetery, and there's people who have lived and died there, and their lives are there. And they have stories to tell, and there was a reason that they chose those towns. And, something that I really think about is with Echoes in the Iron and with music, it's a really small step from, there's nothing going on there to once a month, this little barn hosts this really cool music night. And if you can find out when it is, you need to go to that. It doesn't cost anything. Well, maybe a little, but it's so easy to make that one little step, and it'll grow from there. It'll just continue to ripple out. And like you said, the ripple of difference makers, it just takes one person who wants to make that change. And from there, who knows where it can go. But every town has a story. Every town has a history. And there are people out there right now that just need a little nudge, a little push to get them to do something. And we hope we can be a little part of that story.
So what does that look like so far? I know I've seen like an interview with one of the breweries, and I'm sorry, I can't remember what town it was.
We went to Albion in
Albion,
April.
that's what it was.
Albion Malleable Brewing.
Which is really cool. Albion Malleable Brewing Company is in the same building that was the Albion Iron Company. And Albion has a cool history. In the 60s, it won the award, the All-American City. So, I mean, it's the pinnacle of small-town Americana life. And factories started closing. They had a hospital that closed. They had paper mills, those closed. And all of a sudden, they've lost over 50% of their population. And it was no longer the all-American city. But people like the owners of Albion Malleable and Castor Concepts, they've kind of shouldered the mantle, and they said, we're not going to let this town go away. And they've Albion College there that's helped. So there's a couple difference makers there, and it would have been easier to start a brewery somewhere else with more people. It took them 5 or 6 years to change this building into what it now is. And something I found really cool, we did the brewery, but then we went down the street to Dickerson Music Company, which is this small music store on Main Street that's been there since the 1950s. And they have been involved in all kinds of things. They've walked the beat Albion. They do concerts in the park. They operate this Bohm Theater that was an old, kind of opera hall thing that now does music events there. And, they're a huge part of the community. And they're this kind of tiny music company, music store. So, and it's a beautiful town. Nobody would ever think, like, I'm going to take a weekend and spend it in Albion. But they have this gorgeous park, Victory Park. It's got waterfalls. It has a disc golf course. People travel all over to play disc golf there.
Oh, yeah.
Cool shops in downtown. The Foundry Bakery, we got some pretty good snacks there. The brewery is amazing. In the summer, they do the Black Squirrel Bluegrass Music Festival, which was awesome. It was free. They blocked off Main Street. We went and saw Wilson Thicket there this year, took the kids, and it's like, you just never think like, hey, we're going to go spend the weekend in Albion. Yet there's so much cool stuff to do there.
And as we go to these places, we discover, little facets of history on them, like the Bohm Theater. It just looks like an old theater kind of in the town, but like I think we learned that at Dickerson Music, that used to be where a lot of the Chicago blues players, it's like a halfway to Detroit.
Oh, yeah.
So they'd
stop there.
This is what we're talking about, by having, instead of drive-by, you have places to stop and play. Those people want to hear music there too. I think the Purple Gang used to meet there too. I think we learned that.
The rumor, yeah.
There's tremendous history everywhere you go, and we're not saying, well, that should be a foundry again. We're looking to champion the people that say this might have been a foundry, but this building is perfect for an art studio with a distillery and a performance venue and who knows, whatever, a candle making shop. It doesn't matter. Something that, that is a reuse, that is, instead of dwelling on the past, not forgetting the past, but looking forward to what if we did this? Yeah. And not waiting for somebody else to do it, but they make the leap to say, why not me? Somebody has to do it. Somebody got to do it. In the history of the world, any new innovation, somebody said, why not me?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Something I found really cool in Albion, in the interview we did, kind of go into the idea that, the history is there. We're not trying to create another foundry. But the gentleman we were interviewing, he said, when they sit down and talk about menu changes, they say, what would the guys in the 40s have wanted to eat when they're done with a shift? How would it have been prepared? And so they want to honor that legacy. It's a totally new, different thing. That's so that's cool. The echoes. They're there. And we're not saying you got to pick up a hammer and start making horseshoes, but they're remembering them and they're honoring them in that their own kind of special way. And I just think that's so cool.
It's so freaking cool. It's so freaking cool because you mentioned some of these like different businesses, whether it's candle making. You see a lot of there's I don't even know if it's an old building, but there's a building in Fenton that's now the railway.
Oh,
and they have food trucks and the game. You know, you think of all these different entrepreneurs that come out and be like, "Why not me? I've had this idea in my rattling around my head. Let's start it." And they're revamping all these old buildings. And I talk about like loving towns and like small towns. Like one of my favorite things, like me and my wife vacation around little towns in Michigan, like, you know, just traveling around and hitting little downtowns and getting out and walking down the main streets and checking out the old buildings. And like throughout the years, we've watched as like defunct towns that had nothing and that I've had photographs and pictures of these rundown buildings have become a booming town again, you know, or like that rundown building turned into a brewery or turned into, even look at like Traverse City, that's bigger on a bigger scale. A lot of what they've done with that, their older businesses that have now turned into these really cool things that are just different.
Yeah.
Entertainment, music, and all kinds of different stuff.
Clarkson's a great example too. I mean, the Union Joint started in an old church, right? They turned a mechanic's garage into Honcho. Across the street, the Snyders turned a bank into the Fed, and then
That
Rudy's
has live
Grocery.
music all the time.
Tons of. I mean, that's been I think a big cultural hub in town. And Rudy's Grocery, which was a car dealership before that, is now Rudy's Prime Steakhouse. You know, up and down that street, it's been a revitalization, and they're honoring the history that's there, but kind of forging ahead with a new future.
You know, and if we, you know, can shed some light on, you know, people that are asking themselves that question, why not me? We were involved, Brandon a little more from the planning side, me more from the performance side, but we did the first Clarkston Busk Fest. We helped the Clarkston Arts folks put that together. I think they had the idea of having busking musicians. And what would that look like? Well, what did we get? 9 different performers together to set up at predetermined locations to show up and busk, play their music for an hour, and let's see what happens. With very little advertising, I've never seen a Tuesday night in Clarkston with that many people on the streets. And the funny thing is that the planners and businesses alike, I think, were skeptical, so they sort of did a hands-off, let's see what happens thing.
Yeah.
That won't happen next time because they're already talking about doing it next year, and all the businesses are going to want to get involved. We now have it's a social district. So
We have one too.
you just don't, everybody does now. So, you know, when you're looking around your town and the streets are full of people and they're all drinking, and I'm looking at, I'm like, these people are having to go into these places to buy their drinks. These guys should be having their little counters out there and selling their drinks right out here.
5,000%.
Yeah, even if it's not alcohol, but lemonade or whatever it might be.
Yep.
Because this is happening. And it was huge. And again, it's part of the fabric of community. Some people brought up, well, we should shut the streets down. I'm like, ooh, that's not becoming the fabric of the community. That's disrupting the community.
Yeah.
You know, and I think they ultimately agreed.
I thought we should shut the streets down, and then Bill said that. I was like, of course you're right. I was all about it. Let's shut the street down, food trucks. And he's like, no, we want to enhance what's already here. And,
support the businesses that are there. Mm-hmm. Support the restaurants that are there. You know?
Yeah.
You know, you could bring in food trucks for that, but that would change the fabric of the whole event and the whole meaning of community.
Because the
just bringing everybody together.
Getting the revenue from the food trucks which is a great idea for them. But
so it'll look, I think it'll look a little more, it'll look a little different next summer. But we wonder why towns all over the place aren't doing this, because it was was huge.
It's phenomenal what you can do in just different events. And we had an event here in Brighton over the summer. I don't know if you heard about it or not, but we had two entrepreneurs. One owns London Beauty here in town, and they put together a Gilmore Girls event.
Oh, yeah.
Gilmore, I'd never even seen the show. Gilmore, I had to actually Google it and look it up as we were having it in our town. But so they put together this Gilmore Girls event, and they got 57 other businesses here in town in on it. And every business became a business that was in the show, or they became a destination within the show. And so people came to town and they, did a little pass card of like hitting these different businesses. Like you go in, one of our restaurants became Luke's Diner, which I never, again, I hadn't watched the show, but Luke's Diner was the big restaurant. And so they served the food that Luke's Diner served in the show. So it's crazy. They decided to put this event together. Why not me? We're going to put this event together. Yeah, they put it on TikTok. It ends up going viral. It hits. It's on the news. It's on everything. We packed 100,000 people in our downtown. 100,000 people. And it's not just people from around the local area. We had people from England that came here. England. They flew from England to come to this event.
Wow.
I can walk from the studio to my house, and we had people all around our neighborhood, Wisconsin, Minnesota, California, New York, people coming from other states to come to this event.
That's amazing.
Because of the power of social media, and somebody in our town said, why not me? Let's organize this event. And so you just think of these things that we can do in the community to bring and drive business. Our businesses had to shut down the next day because they didn't have any more stock of their things. We have a candy store that sells hard candies. They took a picture of their inside. He had one piece of candy hanging up on a hook. They had to close down to restock their shelves. It was amazing.
Again, why not me?
Why not me?
If you can, if you put it together and if
you build it, they will come.
And sometimes it takes a little bit of help from people that have done it before or are pretty smart with doing these kinds of things to make it work. And I believe it. I do believe that, at least in America, if you have a dream and you go after it hard enough, you got a pretty good chance. And maybe you'll be surprised that it's not exactly what you thought it was. Maybe, you thought you were going to be, the next center for the, LA Lakers, but 5'4", and but maybe you're the general manager. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or you find something else. We need to get away from watching what other people do and start doing it ourselves.
Yep.
If you go on, maybe you love the whole concept of home improvement. You don't really want to do it. You just love watching people do it. It's there. You can watch it all day long.
My mother-in-law approved it.
Yeah. I hate cooking, but man, I sure like watching people cook. I'm going to sit on Instagram Reels all day watching somebody, make this thing and after that thing, and whatever it is, it's entertainment. But the reality is you can get out there and do it.
You can do it.
And we've really gotten complacent with our involvement in our community because it can be all on our phones. You can get out, park your car, and walk to the restaurant you're going to with your face in your phone the whole way. You might get hit by a car or whatever, but you can do it.
Yeah,
and maybe you'd walk right by that busking musician without thinking twice about it. But it's the fact of the matter is there's a whole big world out there to experience with all of your senses. Not just your thumbs and your eyes and your ears, you can get out there and do this thing, and you can go and see live music. And there's nothing like live music. There really isn't, because we can, and as a musician, as a songwriter and a vocalist or whatever, I'm always thinking, well, why would anybody want to come and see me when the best music in the world can be listened to from the comfort of your own home? You don't have to leave your house to hear all of the best stuff that ever was created, because there's nothing like being in the moment with somebody,
Yeah, it's the relationships, it's the opportunities, it's the conversations. We've talked about it here.
It's all of it.
You two again wouldn't have had that interaction, that connection, and doing what you're doing now. Because now you look at it on the scale, and it's outside of you guys.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. It's now it's making a difference in communities across the Rust Belt, and who knows from there. Because it constantly evolves, all from a relationship that, man, if you look at it, it's greedy to not go out and have that relationship, right? Like,
and we hope. People will watch this and say, you know what? I've been wondering what to do with that building I've got. I can't really sell it. I can't really afford to bring it up to, whether it's whatever kind of standards you might have to ADA or whatever, or new code, whatever it might be, to be able to sell it or to be able to make it into another business. But maybe you can have pop-up community concerts there. And people will pay for that, and maybe that just pays the entertainers to do it, and you have the good feeling of creating something great in your community. But, if you don't go into it for the money, you go into it for the right reasons, you're going to usually get taken care of.
I think if you go into it for the right reasons, we all need to make money, right? But if you go into it for the right reasons, you're going to get taken care of. The money will come. If you add value to people's lives, the money will come.
Absolutely. And how much do you really need? It's just, it's can't take it with you when you go. But I'd rather be on my deathbed with a fully stocked portfolio of experiences than a fully stocked portfolio of stocks and whatever else it might be.
Yep.
Spoken like a true MBA finance graduate, right? But who doesn't invest in the stock market at all? But it's other than mutual funds. But
the experiences in your life that get you here, right? Like, so funny.
How do you put a value on that? The $20 or $30 you might pay to go see something like that, or the $50 or $20 or you might spend on merch, or the $5 you throw in a tip jar, because you were moved by a performance. It makes a difference beyond what that $5 really means to you. $5 is probably not going to move the needle for most people in one way or the other on their monthly budget, but if they do that, it helps immensely to an artist that's traveling around, that's wrestling with, maybe a fee that they negotiated 6 months before gas prices doubled or something like that. You know what I mean? And it all, again, we all have to eat, but there are certainly more lucrative ways to make a living than playing music.
Yeah, you're mostly probably doing it for the love and the passion, right?
Yeah, and it's you like to say, well, if I do it for the right reasons, the good stuff will come along. But it's a tough way to make it. You got to work your tail off to make any money in music. It's like I used to say, well, if you want to make a little bit of money in music, you got to start with a lot of money. So, like many things, passion pursuits can be expensive. Maybe there's value in experience beyond monetary gain.
Absolutely. You mentioned earlier, like somebody wanted to do this, and it's like you're like braving it and kind of going out on your own. And one of the things I thought of is like it doesn't have to be that way, right? Because like you think of Holla Holler, and there's other people. Like somebody started this, and then you can call up that other person that started. Was it 20th Street? 20 Front Street, and pick their brain, right, and have a conversation. And I think about how that spins back to you guys and what you're doing. Like if somebody wanted to do this, what would they do? Like how would they reach out to you? And would that be
That's part of what we hope this thing is going to be, is almost a clearinghouse of everybody that kind of does that. Like this is everybody's going to make their own roadmap for what works for them. You know, if you live in a town with 500 people, it's going to look a little different than you live in a town with 25,000 people.
Yeah.
You know, brick and mortar may not work for you, but your basement or your barn that you don't have any livestock in anymore, it's just full of old stuff. You know, you just never know what you can do, right? Until you do it and you look at it. So, you know, when I talk to Bob Wan about this, he's always, it'd be great if there was let's foster a network of places like Holler all over the place so that people like myself can afford to go and play for people who are, in a lot of cases, starved for entertainment because there's nothing coming through their town. That circus is keeping on 75 and not pulling off to find your town. You know, so it's instead of waiting for something big to come, create something bigger than what it might seem to be.
Yep.
Right where you're at. And you may find yourself very surprised and very fulfilled in a lot of ways by what happens.
Yep. When I started my business, I was like, I wanted to go out and speak, right? And so I was like looking for speaking events. And I was like, I'm brand new, so I'm like, I'm not really finding anything. I have some free speaking events, but I wanted to be on a stage. I wanted to create content of me being on a stage, and I wanted to make some money. Money wasn't the most important thing. It was more the opportunity, right? And so I partnered with a couple other speakers. I put together an event. I literally threw the event. I learned so much out of it. But then from that, I got other speaking opportunities. From that, I got connected to a guy named Adam Ranville who reached out to me and was like, "Hey, are you looking for any more speakers at this event?" Which I wasn't because we were already in the process. But we ended up collaborating. I ended up meeting Brandon from Adam. You know, so you look at just like all the opportunities. I just boiled it down to a couple real quick, but all the opportunities because I went out and I created something instead of waiting for it. I wouldn't be sitting here and having this conversation with you if I wouldn't have done that.
Yeah. You know, one of the funny things that I hear people say, well, I don't know anything about that. I don't know how to do that. And I'm like, don't discount what could be your greatest asset.
5,000%, yeah.
Because if you think you know everything, you're not doing anything new. You're not going to do anything original. So even though we're saying it would be great to have these little places all over, listening rooms or whatever it might be, house concerts or whatever, remember, you got to make it work for you and for where you are and for the people that will come and make it realistic. But the opportunity is there for everyone to do this. It really is. And a lot of times people they don't, like, I would have never thought of that. Would have never thought about that. I've spent the last 10 years living in this town saying, wouldn't that be really cool if there was a place to go see live music over here, without ever thinking you could be the one. You could be the one to do it. You know, you might ask them, well, why didn't you do it? Well, I wasn't a musician. Okay.
Do you know any?
Yeah. I've never run a business before, or I've never operated a venue before. That could be your greatest asset because you're coming at it from a wholly new perspective.
Yep.
That you are able to look at things differently. And some of the greatest innovations in history have been from people who didn't know what the hell they were doing.
Yeah.
And made it their own way. And now everybody's like, well, that's the way to do it. That's the best way to do it. But I keep saying you're better off doing your own thing. But we'd like to be the facilitators to help you, get you in touch with the right people that can tell you about their experiences. Create that network, because the more places like this, the more opportunities are going to be for yours, because there's going to be more people going around doing it, more people hearing about it and wanting to know when is this going to happen in my town? Because they're never going to make the jump from what if to why not me. They're just waiting for the opportunity to go.
Yeah.
Not everybody's going to run this thing, but people are still going to enjoy it. You still got to have an audience, right? And again, it doesn't have to be 150,000 people either. House concerts, 20 to 50 people. is about right. Listening rooms, maybe 30 to 100 people. Some other pop-up type of places, and there's a lot of great places around. We just successfully did one. It was a Wiltsey's production with that 1 ton trolley did. It was our annual Holly Trolley Christmas show, and
that's awesome.
It's amazing to see the people that want to be part of it. Andrew Bowmaster from Passive Mission Productions. We had Deutsch Detroit Food Truck there. We had John Ransom from Winship Studios, who you would have met.
Yep.
And it's just Clarkston Arts, the people that were wanted to be part of this thing. Gentlemen that we're talking to right now about with the future of Echoes in the Iron. Wes Brown, videographer, just came to the show and created some amazing content where all of a sudden we're like, okay, we need to talk to Wes a little bit more, because this is right up our alley for what we're trying to do. So I would say what we are is, we're a catalyst for the what if. But we could be a resource for how to move beyond what if to why not me.
I love that. And so we talked about it being a multimedia company. Can you kind of talk about that that vision of what brings it together? I know the asset, and we talked about the song, but I love, and you talked about kind of this theme of hitting these towns and then having a local musician that kind of partners with you. Can you tell me a little bit about that whole what this looks like?
Yeah, so it's kind of part documentary, part storytelling. Kind of the hub of it all, at least in my mind, is this docuseries we're creating, where we'll go to different towns, some that have done it, some that are doing it, some that are going to do it someday. And really, it's to shine the spotlight on the local people. So each town will try and pair up with some local musicians, some local business owners. We'll put together an episode. I like to say it's kind of like Anthony Bourdain, Parts Unknown, but it's music instead of food. And we'll try and tell the story of the people that are there, the history of that place, to kind of inspire people a little bit. And for those who want to follow along, we're already on all the social media at Echoes in the Iron. We've got the website, echoesintheiron.com. And we'd love you to reach out to us to share your stories, whether you're a musician, business owner, just a community leader who wants to do something. We'd love to hear from everybody.
It's so cool. I love the Anthony Bourdain, Parts Unknown, that whole thing of that docu-series. Because again, we've talked so much about the music, the community, and all that kind of stuff. I love the intangible piece that comes out of it too, because it is then putting that spotlight on that town. It's creating almost a piece of history for them. We just recently had in Brighton, Under the Radar, I think is what it's called, Under the Radar, Michigan. Mm-hmm. They came in and they did a spotlight on 4 of our local businesses. And it was, I'm sitting here, I'm passionate about my downtown. I live here for a reason. I'm very passionate about Brighton, and I'm crying, looking at because the way they captured our business, and that's who they are. They're really authentic people. They, that we're working together, collaborating and all this stuff. And so, but to capture that, it's and then to see it, whether it's in the docuseries or seeing it on TV, I was watching it, it's wow, I'm proud to be here. I'm proud to live in this space.
Yeah.
You know what? Everybody should be proud of where they live,
Yeah.
And a lot of times we take our homes for granted. Because we're too busy being concerned about what we don't have than we are about identifying what we do have, or in our case, helping people realize what they could have, and then taking it that next step to help them get there. It's kind of part of it.
It's huge.
And every town can be a great town, But, you've mentioned the socials. Mm-hmm. If you go on to Spotify or Amazon or any streaming platform, we kind of early on said, well, we should probably have a theme song. So we actually wrote it together. Brandon said, we were talking about, well, how would we put this idea into words or into music? So Brandon sent me some lyrics, and I'm like, I think I actually asked him, I'm like, did you use Chat GPT on this? And he, of course, he did not. He did not, thank God. Yeah. But I had to know. And so I messed with it until I've, found the right feel for the song, and we recorded Echoes in the Iron. We went to the Temper Mill in Ferndale, where I've done a good bit of recording and worked with engineer and producer there, Jake Shives, who is a good friend and a fantastic, just professional. And we made the song and released it, and so that was fun. We said what if, and then we went and did it.
And it's a really powerful song. It's got that haunting, like the echoes in the iron, the lyrics really pull you into everything we're talking about, that history and that feel, and it's just amazing.
Well, thank you.
It worked.
It worked. I love it when a plan comes together. But seriously, and I listened to it again today when you sent it to me, and it's like, it pulls you in, and especially listening to it, I guess from the lens I was listening to it from thinking of the echoes, like putting myself in that spot, or thinking being at Becker Brewery or something like that, and in the conversations and the things and the opportunities that happened in yesteryear, and then we're standing here making new memories and new legacy.
Yeah, challenge yourself to go into a space like that and compete with the ghosts that are there and what they did, and show them you got the next steps. You're going to do something more. I really doubt that hotel thought that they would be a brewery someday.
I doubt it. Yeah.
I'm sure that laundromat in Irvine, Kentucky didn't know it was going to be a listening room. It didn't even know what that was. So, these things, shout into the chamber and listen for the echoes to come back at you. Because if you do, they will.
That's the mic drop moment right there, guys. This has been an awesome episode. I really appreciate reaching out to me, asking to be on, and bringing this and having this conversation. And I admire the work that you're doing. Can't wait to see more of it.
Well, thank you so much for having us. We really appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure.